Hello and welcome to my Westminster office. I just wanted to touch base with you to let you know a bit about the work that I'm doing ahead of next week's budget, because as Labour's Shadow Communities and Local Government Secretary, I'm really concerned that this government has not understood the impact of austerity on local communities, and in particular the role that councils have to play in providing so many important local services and making sure that our communities are as stable and as secure as possible. And what we've seen in recent years is, as a direct consequence of the cuts, many of the services that we've previously taken for granted are no longer able to be delivered in the way that we've traditionally expected them to be. What we've seen since 2010 is £5.8 billion taken out of local councils' budgets. Now, if that was bad enough, it's made even worse by the fact that it's not been evenly distributed across the country. So Labour councils in urban areas have seen 5 times the level of cuts to their budgets than Conservative rural councils have seen. And also, it's not predicated on the ability for local councils to make up the gaps in cuts to government grant funding. So, for example, a 1% council tax increase in Tameside will bring in just £600,000, whereas there are some local authorities where a 1% increase in council tax can plug the gap in the loss in income from central government. So it's really unfair what's happening to local councils, but we're now seeing the perfect storm, because the lion's share of money that's spent by local councils, you and I don't see. It's spent on adult social care and on children's services. Now, the government have recognised some of the problems with adult social care funding, and they've put in place some sticking plasters. So it means that councils, although they've still got an issue with funding adult social care, aids and adaptations, care for the elderly going forward, it's not anything like the problem they'd expected. But where the real problems are starting to surface are in children's services. Because what we're seeing is the wider impact of cuts and of austerity across the public service is now laying itself at the front door of children's services. So more children living in poverty, more children coming from families that the government would call troubled families, fewer support services, whether that's children's centres, Sure Start, public health workers, district nurses, support for families, fewer police on the beat, all bringing the perfect storm of children and safeguarding issues being brought to local councils. And children's services are a statutory service, so if councils are presented with a safeguarding issue, they have to take the appropriate action. Often it's very costly. It costs more than £40,000 a year to take a child into care, for example. So what we've seen is children's services underfunded by £2 billion, and that is the real crisis that's now brewing in local government. So I'll be calling on the Chancellor ahead of the budget next week to make good the promises of properly funding our local councils. They need that funding for adult social care, for children's services, and also for the day-to-day services we all rely on, from street lighting to road repairs, from our parks to our leisure centres, to housing, right the way through to welfare rights and other support services. Let's make sure our communities are strong going forward. They're only strong through proper investment in skills, in jobs, and in our public services. That's what I'll be calling for ahead of the budget. So from me this week in Westminster, thank you for listening.